All right, we're back here on the Chase Amos podcast, taping this on a Tuesday afternoon, where I'm now joined by someone who is quite familiar with UVA and Virginia sports. It's Jerry Ratcliffe. Jerry, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Great, Chase. Thanks for having me, man. Enjoying it.
Thanks for being here, man. How's the website going? How is everything on your end at the moment?
Good. I left the newspaper business like many veteran journalists have in the
Yeah,
past few years. My site's 4 years old this month and doing great. A lot of Virginia fans on it, and we're most grateful.
I love it. I love that kind of stuff, and it's a cool thing. So, folks, go subscribe and go bookmark jerryratcliffe.com if you have not already done so. Jerry, I wanna talk to you about UVA football because we have some news that broke today on just the ACC eliminating divisions officially going into next year. They get 3 permanent. UVA does. This will be a 3-5-5 model. When you look at what UVA ended up getting, so the 8 conference game schedule for the ACC and their permanent rivals, do you think that was the right 3 for them?
No, not really. I think Louisville.
Yeah.
I think Louisville. They seem to have forced Louisville on Virginia as a permanent rival. They were previously Virginia's permanent rival when it was just two, Virginia Tech
Mm,
and Louisville.
yeah.
And Louisville substituted for Maryland when the Terps jumped to the Big Ten in
Mm,
that money grab. And so they had to put somebody in there. And Louisville was the newest member, obviously. They replaced Maryland.
mm,
And they became permanent rivals. And it worked out. It was a good basketball rivalry.
mm.
That was rather lopsided in Virginia's favor. I don't think Louisville won but once the entire time they were in the ACC
Mm.
against Virginia. But football didn't really make any sense and still doesn't. There's really no rivalry there. I think Virginia fans would have much rather played someone like Georgia Tech, who they have a
Yeah.
really great history with going back to the late 80s. And so, a very nice rivalry with the Yellow Jackets. That would have made a lot more sense to Virginia fans, but Louisville just doesn't seem to fit.
Interesting. Do you think the new scheduling model and removing divisions helps UVA football in the long term, or do you think it just doesn't really move the needle either way?
I don't think it helps Virginia. I know that their AD said that she thinks what's good for the ACC is good for Virginia, but I don't agree. I think
Mm,
taking away divisional play, Virginia only won the Coastal Division once since it
yeah.
was instituted in, I think, 2005, and that was in 2019. And even though they were blown out by Clemson in the championship game, it did give them an opportunity to play in the Orange Bowl,
Mm,
which was a big deal for this program. And Bronco Mendenhall, as he was trying to build things. Um, but if you take away the divisional play, then Virginia has to finish in the top two of a 14-team league instead of a 7-team division, and which I think is much more challenging.
yep.
Um, I just don't. If you look back at the history of Virginia football, it just only twice have they been co-champions of the ACC. That was in '89 and '95, and I just don't see Virginia's program at the point yet where they can challenge for those top two positions. It's going to be make a lot more work for Tony Elliott and his new staff to try to finish second in a 14-team league than first in a 7-team division.
That's a good point. I mean, that's kind of where they're going, it seems like, all across the board. And I was telling folks, like me being here in SEC country, like I don't think it will ultimately affect Tennessee all that much. I think Tennessee will has the opportunity to be in that top 5 and be in that top 2 type of thing in the not too distant future. They can recruit at that level, they can get there. But if you're a Mizzou, if you're a Vanderbilt, if you're a lot of these other programs, Mississippi State, it's near like the divisions were something where, like you said, like it's easier to climb to get to that conference championship game when it's 7 or 6 teams that you have to get through versus the entire conference. And I do think the little guys will ultimately be canceled out of these championship games going forward. But I do like that there's going to be more diversity in the schedule. Like teams, like it's insane that there are SEC conference members that have not played on both at both stadiums to this point. Where Georgia fans have not traveled to A&M since they've been to the moved to the SEC. So you're like, man, I understand that part of it, but it's like if that gets the scheduling fixed, where we get more of those kind of games and we get more diversity in the calendar, and we get more conference games, I'm for it. But it seems like there's going to be a parity sacrifice in terms of conference championship games and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense for the ACC because
Mm,
uh, they want to have two teams in the playoffs, and they
mm,
figure that that's the best way to try to get a second team in is to have a strong second place finisher who can
mm,
qualify for the playoffs. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but yeah, maybe down the road, and particularly if they expand the playoffs. But under the current structure, I don't know that it's going to help that much. The ACC seems to be feeling like the redheaded stepchild of college football in the fact that uh, they can't keep up with the Big Ten and the SEC in terms of money. And
yeah.
I believe they feel like this might help balance the scales a little bit, although I'm not certainly convinced of that. But yeah, I think for the teams that um, haven't shown the capability of finishing in the top two on even a semi-regular basis, it's going to work against them in terms of trying to win the conference or even play in the championship game, and that's um, I don't know that that's good for the overall being of the conference. Certainly for the top of the conference where teams are competing for a championship, but not saying that other teams can't. But I think the odds of it are stacked against them in doing so.
I would agree. But we'll see. You do have one of the most fun quarterbacks in the country still. You got the Southpaw, you got Brennan Armstrong, who's back. Um, is there a case to be made that he actually is the best quarterback going into the 2022 ACC season?
I think Virginia fans would argue that for sure, and some
Yeah.
people outside the conference as well. I mean, he led the nation in passing for much of last season, um, and was pretty good in total yardage too because he's a dual threat quarterback. Um, I think they have learned that they would rather him not run the ball as much because when he got hit in that BYU high scoring BYU loss last year, he was uh, broke some ribs and missed the Notre Dame game 2 weeks later, which I'm still convinced that had he been healthy, they would have given Notre Dame a fight to the finish and might have pulled off the
Hmm.
upset because it was here. He was enjoying a great second half of the season, and his numbers are very impressive. Some of the best numbers in college football since 2009. He has great accuracy. He has particularly under pressure. His numbers grew.
Mm,
Percent his accuracy grew. Play action numbers are good. His deep throws are outstanding. He has some great deep threats in Dontavian Wicks and Lavelle Davis, who missed last year with a knee injury, but the year before, as a true freshman, led the nation in long catches and average per catch. Uh, so he has great receivers coming back, and I think he'll only be better as a passer. Their new quarterbacks coach, Taylor Lamb, and their previous quarterbacks coach would readily tell you he has every throw in the book.
hmm,
And he's a smart quarterback. He's a very fiery kid, a good
mm,
leader. Um, I think there is a lot of argument there that he is the best quarterback in the ACC. Some experts will say fundamentally he may not be what you look for in a first round or top draft choice, but he has found ways to overcome that, even though it might not be the most technically sound throwing action that there is out there, but he finds ways around it.
The dude just puts up numbers.
Yes.
Did you have any inkling that Bronco Mendenhall was going to retire before he did it? Did you hear some rumors, and were you not caught off guard like the rest of America in terms of Mendenhall stepping away?
I think everyone was caught off guard. Chase,
Mm,
he had won the Coastal Division in 2019 ahead of his schedule. Uh, the COVID year, they finished 500, and last year they finished a disappointing 500 after getting off to a hot start.
mm,
They blew the Virginia Tech game at home in the last game of the season with some really bad calls by the offensive coordinator, who's now at Syracuse.
mm,
But the, you know, when they didn't go to a bowl because the team was plagued with COVID, um, I think it was a bummer for everyone. And then uh, their defense was atrocious last season. They couldn't stop anyone. In all the metrics that count, they finished in the hundreds.
mm,
Uh, and there was a lot of pressure coming from the fan base to replace the defensive coordinator, if not the entire defensive staff.
mm,
I think that weighed heavily on the AD, who essentially told Bronco he was going to have to do something. Uh, I think at first he agreed just a couple of days after the season was over. It looked like they had made an offer to Anthony Poindexter, the
mm,
co defensive coordinator at Penn State, to come in and be the defensive coordinator. In fact, it was announced to some of the heavy hitters that that's what was going to happen. And then overnight, Bronco changed his mind, and uh, he just couldn't fire his people. Uh,
yeah.
I think,
So you think if he wasn't put in that position where he had to fire anybody, he's back?
yeah, I think so. And
Hmm.
I think that was just too much. As you know, I think the Mormon factor
Mm,
weighed into that because these guys are more than just assistant coaches on the staff. They're almost like brothers,
mm,
and I think it was just too much, and it just turned him off to the degree that he felt like that if he had to fire someone, that he would rather just fall on the sword and resign, and that's what he did, and I think it shocked not only the fan base but also the coaching staff. A lot of them were upset that he would throw in the towel that easily, and it was sad. I think the fact that he had been here 6 years and had rebuilt the program. It was a decent, respectable program, fun offense to watch.
mm.
Um, but I think a faction of the fan base felt like that he had taken them about as far as he was going to take them, and so some people felt like maybe a change might be in order to advance this program to another level.
Do you think we see Bronco again, or do you think he's done?
Yeah, and I've thought a lot about that, Chase, and
Mm,
I kind of hope he does get back into coaching because I think the coaching profession needs people like Bronco. He's very
mm,
humble, honest guy who loves his players and is good for the game. He believes in all the right things. I'd like to see him get back in it, but I wonder if this experience and the NIL and the transfer portal and all the changes maybe have left a bad taste in his mouth, and that once he experiences a year without football,
mm.
he's a very intelligent man, a deep thinker who's involved in the Mormon Church and a lot of other things. I wonder if that might weigh heavy on him to maybe turn his efforts in another direction and not return to football. So I think right now it's probably at least 50-50, if not 60-40, that he won't come back.
That's wild. Young dude, super super talented and a really really good coach. One of the more underrated coaches of the last 10 to 15 years in college
Yes.
football. And that's another one where it's like you have Bill Clark who got there. A lot of like underrated coaches who I always wanted to see kind of at that premier school where you have the talent and see what they could do with just an unbelievable recruiting budget. Like see what Bronco does with an unbelievable recruiting budget. See what Bill Clark at UAB, if he had gotten the Auburn job eventually and seen what he would have done there. I don't know. There's a lot of what ifs for a lot of the good dudes in college coaches, and just kind of wondering what could have been if they had gone somewhere else. But I think by and large, I think if you're a UVA fan, you look at the Mendenhall experience as a net positive, and I think the program is in a better place after he's gone than what he walked into, which is kind of where you want to be. You don't want to lose him, but if at the very least the program was in a situation where you could attract a Tony Elliott, right? Where Bronco had it in a spot where, yeah, it's rough, but I mean, it was up to like it looked like it was going to be Poindexter or Tony Elliott, and that's a good spot to be in. Where two guys who I mean, that highly great recruiters, two guys that highly respected in the game, and seem like more long term fits with the changing. And Tony Elliott knowing with NIL and just how to recruit, especially in that area, and I mean, it's an exciting time. So I think you can't. It seems like to me you would not be able to jump from Bronco to Tony Elliott if Bronco did not do what he needed to do with that group. So when you look at Tony Elliott, though, Jerry, is this somebody you see getting to the next level? Has he already done stuff off the field in this spring and the summer that makes you think that UVA football could get to a level they have not been in a long time with him at the helm, or do you think he's going to run into a lot of the same roadblocks that Bronco ran into?
I think he will run into some of the same roadblocks, but I think there's enough changes in his philosophy that he might be able to overcome them a little bit easier,
Mm,
particularly in recruiting. He's already has four commitments from the state of Virginia,
mm,
which is more than some entire recruiting classes by Bronco during his 6 years here in
mm,
terms of in-state recruiting. They just could never get a real foothold in the state of Virginia. And if you look at all the really great Virginia teams since the George Welsh days, those rosters were filled with Virginia talent, and
mm,
they had uh, they had picked up some really great athletes who went on to star in the NFL.
mm,
Um, so I think he's refocused the energy in terms of recruiting to the state, and particularly in the Tidewater area. It's a talent-rich area that
hmm.
North Carolina and Penn State have taken a lot of really good recruits in recent years, even during the Bronco era, particularly North Carolina. And
So that may have
Virginia
been
Tech
why
as
Poindexter
well.
got a hard look there.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
So I think that's going to help. I think this staff and the head coach are a little more laid back,
Hmm.
which I think they've already built a stronger relationship with their players.
Hmm.
Um, to go see Bronco, I think a lot of those players had to make an appointment. To
Hmm.
go see Tony, all they got to do is show up, or anybody on his staff. I think that has made things a little easier and toward the relationship building part of it.
Hmm.
Um, the school has invested $80 million in building a new football operations center, which was desperately needed. Their other building was constructed, I think, in 1990, and was really a breakthrough thing that helped George Welsh advance his program
Hmm.
and add recruiting. I think that's going to help Virginia because it shows that there's a commitment here to winning football. And sometimes I think that some of the heavy hitters were waiting to see what might happen with the program, whether they
Hmm.
were convinced it could go to another level before they would invest that kind of money. So I think there's some things going on with Tony's program that perhaps will enhance his abilities to make it a step
Hmm.
toward the next level. He's still got to prove it on the field, and that's going to be the tough part. Um, he doesn't use academics as an excuse. He embraces that part of it, and he feels like he can attract academically inclined football players who can win. And the AD said there's no excuses that a academic school like Virginia can't have a winning football program. Um,
Just look at Wake.
Wake Forest, yeah. I mean Notre Dame to some degree,
Hmm.
Stanford. Um, so it's possible. It's just a matter of going out and doing it. And to do that, you got to be able to recruit well, and that's been his big focus ever since he stepped on grounds.
Has it been mostly positive from fans? Are they pretty excited from your readers and folks visiting the site and everything? Were they ecstatic that like Tony Elliott was their guy, and if they had to pick one to replace Bronco, he was the one? And to this point, they're pleased with the direction.
Yeah, Chase. There was a lot of early enthusiasm for Poindexter
Hmm.
because if he was an All-American here and
Right.
still remains one of the most popular guys to ever put on a Virginia uniform.
Hmm.
Um, I think he would have been a great fit, even though he did not have head coaching experience. Then again, neither does Elliott. But
Or Brent
uh,
Pry, who went over to Virginia Tech.
right, um, I think he probably would have won more hearts over more quickly and energized the fan base
Mm.
just because he's a Virginia guy and he knows what it takes to win here. But I think he wanted some things in his interview that the school wasn't willing to give. And
Hmm.
Tony, I think it was up in the air between he and Tony Elliott. And Tony, some of the things that I think that Poindexter wanted, um, Elliott did not ask for, and
Hmm.
instead chose to embrace NIL situation here and academics. And um, he's a very impressive guy, a very friendly, down to earth, laid back guy that I think the fans can relate to. He has re-energized the fan base. Everybody who meets him instantly falls in love with him because he's just that kind of guy. Um, Very enthusiastic, very positive. Um, he has a proven record as an offensive coordinator, and he'll be the first to admit that sitting in the big chair is an adjustment that
Hmm.
he's trying to adjust to all those demands and let his coaches coach. We're still intrigued to find out how much of a footprint or fingerprints he will have on the offense.
Hmm.
I don't know that he can help himself,
Yeah, especially in
having
year
called
one.
Clemson's plays for 11 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if they couldn't get Poindexter, I think Tony Elliott was an excellent choice, and I don't think they could have done any better, really.
It's so funny how little things, because Tony Elliott was the guy I wanted post Jeremy Pruitt, where everyone on Rocky Top was like, "Oh, we're actually in." We didn't think that there was a possibility Tony Elliott was an option for Tennessee because of just the situation. Because everything, it's just amazing. Folks don't realize if you were in Knoxville or around, like just how bad it was in January, February of 2021, and to see where we are now, it's unbelievable to see the turnaround and just where things stand at this moment. But the rumors circling where it was like Tony Elliott's got a real shot of taking he might leave Clemson for the UT job, and then of course it doesn't happen, and we land Josh Heupel, and it worked out for all parties involved. And it's just funny because like we have a different world where if he's out, then it's Poindexter most likely who's coaching UVA because Elliott's in Knoxville, and it's just the choices are all different. And I don't know. I think it's super fascinating to think about the what if stuff here, but Elliott, I think by and large, man, I think it's an exciting hire for them. But we'll see what ultimately happens. But I think that's a good gamble for UVA folks is Tony Elliott and seeing what he can do there in Virginia. But what is the most interesting summer storyline for you? That it can be from spring on. Is there a position battle that you've got your eye on? What has caught your eye this summer in terms of the actual players and on the field for UVA?
I think the big thing, Chase, is what John Rudzinski is going to do with this defense.
Hmm.
As we mentioned earlier, it was one of the worst defenses in America last year, and they lost a couple of key players off that defense. So
Well, do you think part of it is just that the offense was so prolific that they were just putting up bonkers numbers, and Brennan Armstrong was passing so much, and their offense was so high octane? It's kind of like the Tennessee thing where you score so much, there's so many plays that it's hard to have a good defense when your offense is as efficient and as high octane as that UVA offense was last year, right?
Yeah, to some degree, I believe
Mm,
that's correct. I mean, Bronco told us before the season last year, we're going to score a lot of points.
yeah.
And, a lot of coaches won't tell you that.
Hmm.
They won't make a statement like that. But he knew his team, and he was right.
He was right. Yeah.
What we didn't know is that they were going to have to score a lot of points to win. I mean, you
Well,
score
maybe that's what he was
49.
also implying there. We're scoring a lot of points
Yeah.
because we might have to.
Yeah, you score 49 points at BYU and you
Mm,
still give up 66. So, and it's over 700 yards of offense. So, even with that calculation in consideration, I still think this defense was still pretty poor because fundamentally they just weren't sound.
mm,
They struggled to tackle. Uh, they blew a lot of assignments. They were misaligned. Uh, they gave up so many big plays. It was uh, ridiculous.
mm,
Um, so in comes Ruzinski, who from Air Force, who has a history of putting out some pretty stingy defenses and very fundamentally sound defenses, which I think everybody recognized that's what Virginia needed.
mm,
He will be the first to tell you that he's used to accomplishing more with less in terms of talent. So
mm,
I think that struck Tony's eye. And he brought one of his assistants with him. I noticed in the spring game that they seemed to be more fundamentally sound. They didn't blow that many assignments, particularly
mm,
in pass coverage. The tackling seemed more solid. Um, if somebody did get open, there wasn't really any yards after catch. They brought them down almost immediately.
mm.
A lot of little simple things that make a ton of difference. That's going to be the challenge this fall because I think they're still going to score a lot of points, even though they had a mass exodus of the offensive line through
Mm.
the transfer portal, which didn't make any sense to me because they retained their offensive line coach, who the
Hmm.
players loved. But instead, they had one guy, an All American center, go to Michigan.
Yep.
They had another guy go to Southern Cal, another guy to go to SMU, scattered out all over the country.
Might be
To
NIL related.
Could be,
Hmm.
could be, and but so that's if they can find enough guys to build a patchwork line to give Armstrong enough protection, I still think they're going to score a lot of points because they might have the best receiving core in America coming back,
Hmm.
and so it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out. But I guess those are the big two storylines going into the fall: is can this offensive line protect? Can they build a little bit of a running game, which they haven't really had throughout the Bronco era. And Tony Elliott desperately wants to have more of a balanced attack where he can have a reliable running game. We're not convinced that it's there yet, and whether this defense can just field a decent unit to where they don't have to score 45 points to win every game.
Yeah. When you look at the VT game this fall, is this going to be one of the more interesting VT experiences? Both programs bringing in new coaches, first time coaches, the same time. I feel like I've just got this circled. I'm extremely interested to see how year one goes for Brent and Tony. Like, is that something UVA fans are excited about, especially this year with both coaches? I mean, kind of like there was some crossover with Brent Pry and Poindexter, DC's, co-DC's in Happy Valley, and he goes to VT, and like that could have been hilarious if Poindexter ends up at UVA and Brent ends up at VT. But is it especially interesting to you this year? You're really excited to see what that looks like between the two.
Yeah, I am, and I think Virginia fans are as well. It was funny that Bronco and uh, Fuentes
Mm,
both came in at the same time
true.
before. Uh, Fuentes inherited a stronger program, obviously, and
Mhm.
managed to maintain it pretty well until things kind of fell apart toward the end. But the fact that the game is in Blacksburg probably doesn't have Virginia fans too excited because they haven't won there since 1998,
Mhm.
um, which has been an embarrassment to the program. Their best chance to have broken that domination was here last year, and they were driving for the winning touchdown in the waning moments of the game, and the offensive coordinator comes up with a brilliant play call to throw a behind the lines tackle eligible pass uh, on third and something like 10
Mhm.
uh, down at inside in the red zone, and
Yeah.
the guy was the poor tackle caught the ball 16 yards from the goal line and had absolutely no chance of getting a first down, let alone a touchdown. And so I think that led to a lot of issues with fans and the Broncos staff the way they blew that game. Um, I think everybody's going to be excited, but
What were you doing though, putting Coastal before this game? Like, what is the Coastal spot right there? I don't know what happened on the schedule. When you look at the schedule, what are you doing throwing Coastal right in between Pitt and VT? What happened there?
that's yet to be explained. And I
Oh
don't
my
know if they were
god.
trying to copy some of the SEC schools who
Yeah.
play a non-conference.
Well, those non-conference games we play late are against teams we're going to be favored in beating. Like those are the cupcakes. It's kind of like a get right week late in the year where your
Yeah,
bodies are beaten down from a lot of SEC action that you put a UT Martin or something on the calendar late to give you a breather. You don't
yeah.
put on Coastal.
Yeah, we still haven't heard an explanation for that one, and
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
I don't think it was a very brilliant move. In prior years they wanted to play teams like that up front in their schedule, like
Yeah.
they are mostly this year with
Well, that's what I was
Richmond.
going to say is like this year when you look at their schedule, I was outlining like who could be this year's like 2007 USF where they start off 6-0, they rise up the ranks kind of like Iowa a year ago where Iowa was number 2 in the country at one point and then things happened down the stretch. But like a lot of people love Purdue's early schedule. I was looking at UVA. We were talking about on the podcast last week where I was like, there's a chance they're favored in 5 of the first 6 games on their schedule. That is
Yeah,
very much in play. Like
yeah,
we
they
could be looking.
they play Richmond at
Mhm.
Illinois, Old Dominion at Syracuse, at Duke, Louisville, and at Georgia Tech.
Yeah, they're
All
favored in 5
winnable
of 6 of those
games.
games, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
all winnable games, and so they do have a chance to start fast, and they have a very tough stretch last game of October and the first 2 weeks of November when they play Miami,
Yep.
Carolina, and Pitt, which should decide the Coastal over
Mhm.
those 3 weeks. But they're all at home, so
That's true.
um, something to get excited about. But if you're familiar with Virginia or you're a Wahoo fan,
Mm,
you never take anything for granted when it comes to Tech because there's been so many years when
mm.
Virginia probably should have won that rivalry game and either just didn't show up or found ways to blow the game like last year. So you don't take anything for granted when it comes to playing the Hokies.
Well, let's end on this. How many wins do you think is when you look? We just went through the schedule. How many wins do you see, and how many do you think is fair to expect from Tony Elliott with this group this fall?
I'm thinking 7 is a good number.
Mm,
Obviously, of some swing games there that could uh, make it increase to 8 or
mm,
conceivably 9 if everything goes the way he hopes it will.
mm.
Also, if they can't defend, they could drop down to 6-6 again. I think, but I think 7 is a fair number to start with, and then um, I think 8 is definitely within reach, um, and we'll see from there. But that means that the offense is again going to have to click on all cylinders and probably put up a lot of points and hope that the defense can hold on.
I'm okay betting on the over there because, I mean, if you have the best quarterback in the conference again and there's no drop off going from Bronco to Tony and he's okay with the new offensive philosophy and he's fine, like it's just you look at last year, Wake and Pitt were both top 10 offenses, and guess what? They both won 10 games and they were in the ACC title game. Like if this offense is humming, like you said, and Brennan is the best quarterback this fall in Charlottesville, like that, hey, guess what? They're going to be a good team and they're going to win a lot of football games. That's just kind of how the sport works. If you have an elite offense, it's really, really hard to keep them from winning the majority of their games. It's just how the game's
Yeah,
played. Offense
yeah,
wins games.
yeah, and even Lindy's magazine, football
Mm-hmm.
magazine, picked Virginia second to Miami and the Coastal. Um, so it's possible they can not slip up on that early schedule
Yeah,
and find a way to win a couple of those home games in that key stretch. They could win 8, 9. Uh,
I agree.
it's hard to imagine them winning 10 because they've only done that once in school history. But
What year was
um,
that?
89.
89. Okay.
It was the year before they were number one and played Tennessee in the Sugar Bowl. Uh,
Yeah. Speaking of
way
Tennessee,
before
is
you
that a
were born,
thing?
I'm sure.
Yeah, that I was 91, just before I was born, just before.
Yeah.
Do you think that's gonna be a rivalry? Because I always tell folks where I'm like, the game that we should have on the calendar every year, like the Battle of Bristol with VTech was huge, and there's a lot of Hokie fans in East Tennessee, and we're not far from Hokie land, where it's like I don't understand why that's not a non-conference game that we do a lot. I think both fan bases would love an opportunity to go to Knoxville or Blacksburg. Like I would love a reason to go up there and then do Bristol every 5 years or something. But they're doing UVA next year in Nashville. We dropped BYU for that one. That might be game one for Nico. So you have that to look forward to potentially on a trip to Nashville. But I don't know. Is there a possibility that could be something? Like, do you see a lot of Tennessee fans in UVA country? Do you think that that's something that they would be interested in? Is doing trying to see if there's a rivalry there potentially?
I I think potentially, since they're border states, sort of.
Yeah.
I I would like to see it. I've always wondered why they didn't play Tennessee more,
Hmm.
West Virginia more, and even Georgia more because they have a very old history with Georgia going back
Yeah.
to the
Well, you don't want
early
to play Georgia right now.
1900s.
You don't want to throw that on the calendar right now,
No,
Jerry.
I don't. Although they were supposed to open up the COVID year with Georgia and the
That's
Mercedes
right.
Dome, and that got stomped on by COVID.
Yeah.
Um, but they played Georgia several times in bowl games throughout the '90s and early 2000s. Um, so yeah, I would like to see them play someone
Hmm.
like that rather than someone like Illinois that they really have nothing in common with, or some other big meaningless Big Ten game. I think fans in this part of the country would appreciate a series with an SEC school a lot more.
Absolutely. Jerry, how do the good folks check out your work? Support jerryratcliffe.com. How can they do that after listening to this program?
Yeah, just call it up. We're a free website, jerryratcliffe.com, ratcliffe.com, for anything you want to know about UVA athletics. And we appreciate any support you'd like to give us.
There you go. Bookmark it. Check it out this summer as you get ready for another college football season. All kinds of great coverage, not just UVA football, UVA sports in general. So, Jerry, thank you so much for making the time this afternoon. I greatly appreciate it. We'll have to check back in again soon.
Anytime, Chase. Love to be with you.